The clinking of glasses and the hum of laughter filled the air like a song I didn't belong to. Our family dinners were always grand affairs, chandeliers dripping with gold light, crystal dishes glimmering, and too many smiles that never quite reached anyone's eyes. My parents loved to host them, loved the performance of perfection. And I, as always, played the dutiful daughter, smiling on cue, helping guests to their seats, pretending not to notice the sharp glances exchanged when I said something they deemed too simple or too soft. That night, I had gone upstairs to fetch a shawl. The evening air drifting through the open windows carried a chill, and I remember thinking how the night sky looked like velvet stretched over secrets. When I came back down, I stopped by the doorway that led to the dining room, half hidden by the heavy oak frame. That's when I heard it. "She's too foolish to notice." My mother's voice drifted out, calm and clear. "We only keep her around for her money." The words slid through the air like a knife through silk, quiet, elegant, and cruel. I froze. At first, I thought I had misheard. Maybe she was joking. Maybe it was some twisted misunderstanding. But then my father laughed, that deep, booming laugh that had once comforted me as a child. "Exactly," he said, his tone dripping with amusement. "As long as the inheritance remains in her name, we need her happy and pliant. After the marriage is arranged, we'll have full access to it all. Then she can play the helpless daughter-in-law somewhere far away." There was more laughter. My uncles and aunts chuckled in agreement, clinking their glasses in a silent toast. My breath caught in my throat. The shawl slipped from my hands, and I pressed a palm against the wall to steady myself. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would give me away. So that was it. All the affection, the gifts, the proud smiles, they weren't love. They were investments. "We're so proud of you, darling," had been a transaction, a line in a ledger I hadn't known existed. I wasn't a daughter. I was an account balance. I took a step back, slow and quiet. My vision blurred with tears that burned more than they fell. The golden lights of the dining room flickered through the doorway, and for the first time, I saw the people seated there not as family, but as strangers wearing my blood. "Don't worry," my mother continued, her voice sharp as glass. "She's too naive to suspect anything. Poor girl thinks the world is still kind." The guests laughed again. My father raised his glass. "To Alara, our golden girl," he said. The toast echoed like a mockery. I turned and fled up the stairs before anyone could see me. Once in my room, I locked the door, pressed my back against it, and let the tears fall freely. My reflection in the mirror looked foreign. Eyes red, lips trembling, skin pale as marble. How long had they lied to me? Since grandmother's death? Since I inherited her fortune at 18? Every kind word, every hug. How much of it had been rehearsed? The ache inside me twisted into something darker. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter, colder. A resolve forming beneath the heartbreak. Downstairs, I could still hear their laughter floating up through the walls. The sound that once meant warmth now felt like poison. I wiped my tears, picked up the shawl from where it had fallen, and folded it neatly on my bed. If they thought I was too foolish to notice, I would let them keep thinking that. Because someday soon, they would realize what it feels like to lose everything they took for granted. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to shout or cry. I would only need to stand there, silent, steady, and let them see what they'd created. The morning after that dinner, the house looked the same, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the smell of roses from the garden drifting in. Yet everything felt wrong. Every corner, every framed photograph, seemed to hum with the echo of their laughter. I went downstairs as if nothing had happened. My mother was already in the parlor, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. "Morning, darling," she said, not even looking up. "Morning, mother," I replied softly, forcing a smile. If she noticed the stiffness in my voice, she didn't show it. My father joined us minutes later, humming some cheerful tune as he read the business section of the newspaper. Their casual ease was almost impressive. They had lied for years, and they were good at it. For days, I played my part as perfectly as they had played theirs. I went to charity galas, joined in dinner conversations, and even laughed when expected. But behind the mask, I was learning, watching, planning. The first thing I did was visit Liam, my childhood friend. He worked as a legal consultant for high-profile estates, and had always looked out for me like a protective brother. I told him I wanted to understand my finances better, pretending it was part of some maturity and independence phase. He smiled, amused but supportive. "About time you started paying attention, Ilera," he said as we pored over the documents in his office. That's when the truth began to unravel. My parents had access to nearly every part of my inheritance under the guise of family management. They had transferred funds into joint investments, taken loans using my name, and made property deals that funneled profits into their private accounts. It was so meticulously woven that even I had never noticed. "Do you want me to start undoing this?" Liam asked gently, sensing my unease. I forced a calm tone. "Not yet. I just want to understand it all first." He nodded, trusting me. He didn't need to know the storm brewing behind my quiet words. Over the next few months, I learned everything I could: bank accounts, assets, legal clauses, trust terms. Every day, I smiled at my parents at breakfast and spent my afternoons studying how to dismantle their empire. It was almost poetic. They had built their comfort on my ignorance, and now my silence was the weapon that would end it. At night, I often stood on the balcony, looking over the gardens where I'd once played as a child. I remembered my grandmother's voice, soft, loving, wise. "Money makes people forget who they are, Ilera," she used to say. "Promise me you'll never let it own your heart." I had promised, but she hadn't warned me what to do when it owned everyone else's. By the time spring turned to summer, I had quietly taken back control of my accounts. I appointed new financial advisors, replaced signatures, and redirected legal ownership, all under the guise of simplification. My parents were delighted at first, thinking I was preparing for the marriage they had planned for me. The irony made me smile. They didn't notice the slow shift, the phone calls they no longer received from the lawyers, the documents they stopped being copied on. To them, I was still their sweet, simple daughter. To me, they had become ghosts living in a house they no longer owned. Liam eventually began to suspect I wasn't just organizing. "You're planning something," he said one evening, studying my face. I didn't deny it. "I'm just protecting what's mine," I replied softly. He didn't ask more. Maybe he didn't want to know. When I looked at my parents now, I didn't see monsters. I saw people who had traded love for greed and didn't even realize the cost. That thought didn't bring anger anymore. It brought a strange, steady calm. I had cried enough for them. Now it was time to let them believe their illusion a little longer. Because when it shattered, it would break far more than their finances. It would break the foundation of everything they had built. The lie that they were ever a family. And I would be there to watch it crumble. The night of the grand announcement arrived dressed in gold and deception. My parents had spared no expense. Our mansion glittered with chandeliers, the dining tables lined with white roses, and the air thick with perfume and pride. Guests poured in like a river of silk and diamonds, relatives, business partners, even the local mayor. Everyone believed this evening would mark the formal announcement of my engagement to Elias Harrow, a wealthy heir my parents had chosen. He was kind enough, but shallow, a man who saw my inheritance before he saw me. My parents adored him. To them, he was the perfect key to unlock the rest of my fortune. They didn't know this dinner would unlock something else entirely. As I descended the grand staircase, the room fell silent. My mother's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. My father's smile stretched wide, proud and possessive. I looked every bit the picture of their success. An elegant gown, pearls around my neck, and a smile they mistook for innocence. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father began, tapping his glass. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate our beloved daughter's wonderful news." I raised a hand gently. "Actually, father," I said, my voice calm but cutting through the noise like glass. "If I may, I'd like to speak first." The room stilled. My mother frowned slightly, but she nodded, assuming I'd gush about my engagement. I stepped forward, my heart beating steady, not with fear, but with purpose. "Before we celebrate," I began, "I think it's only fair that I share something I've recently discovered." A ripple of curiosity spread across the room. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. "For years," I continued, "I've been blessed, or so I thought, to have a family who loved me unconditionally. But recently, I learned that love can wear masks. Beautiful ones. masks that smile while they steal. My father laughed nervously. Ilara, darling, this isn't the time for. Oh, but it is, I interrupted softly. Because it's the perfect time to take them off. From the corner of the room, Liam appeared, holding a slim folder. He walked toward me, placed it in my hands, and stepped back silently. I opened it and pulled out a few sheets, legal documents, financial statements, and letters. These, I said, holding them up for everyone to see, are records of the accounts and assets that were once under my name. Some of you here might recognize them. You've helped manage them on my parents' behalf. Murmurs filled the air. My mother's face paled. What are you doing? She hissed under her breath. Showing the truth, I replied. I projected a few documents on the screen behind me, emails, signatures, transactions that proved how they had funneled my inheritance into their ventures, all under the guise of family trust. Gasps rippled through the room. I discovered these after hearing something interesting during one of our dinners, I said softly, my gaze locking on theirs. A conversation I wasn't meant to hear. You said I was too foolish to notice. You said you only kept me around for my money. My mother's lips trembled. My father tried to speak, but no words came. You were wrong, I continued. I noticed everything. I just let you believe I didn't, until it was too late to fix it. I stepped back, letting the silence swallow the room. As of last month, all the properties, accounts, and shares tied to my inheritance have been legally transferred back under my sole control. The house you stand in, the business you run, it no longer belongs to you. The color drained from my father's face. He reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. My mother whispered my name like a prayer, but it fell flat. I don't want your apologies, I said quietly. I just want you to understand that love isn't something you buy, manipulate, or fake. You taught me what greed looks like. Now, I'm free from it. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, the guests whispered, the cameras flashed, and the empire my parents had built began to crumble in real time. For years, they had played me like a pawn. But tonight, the board was mine. And as I stepped into the night, I felt the first breath of freedom. Cool, clean, and untainted by lies. The days after the dinner passed in a blur of silence. News of the scandal spread through the city faster than wildfire. Newspapers whispered about the heiress who outwitted her parents, and gossip circles spun tales of betrayal and justice. I ignored them all. Let the world talk. Their voices meant nothing now. I left the mansion that same night, carrying only a small suitcase and my grandmother's locket. I didn't look back as the house faded into the distance. It wasn't home anymore. It never had been. Weeks turned into months. I settled in a small coastal town 2 hours away, where no one cared about last names or fortunes. I rented a modest cottage overlooking the sea, a place that smelled of salt and freedom. Every morning, I watched the sunrise paint the horizon in soft pinks and golds. It was the first time in years I felt alive, not as an heiress or a daughter, but as myself. The revenge I had carried for so long began to soften, transforming into something quieter. It wasn't about destroying them anymore. It was about reclaiming my peace. I used part of my reclaimed inheritance to start a foundation in my grandmother's name, the Marlowe Children's Trust for underprivileged children who had lost their families. The first day I saw their smiles, genuine, unguarded, I realized that was the truest victory of all. I was giving love where greed once ruled. Liam visited once months later. He brought news. My parents had lost almost everything. Their business collapsed without the funding I had unknowingly supplied, and most of their friends vanished when the money did. The mansion was being sold to cover debts. They're not doing well, Liam said quietly. I nodded, stirring my tea. I didn't want to ruin them, Liam. Just to stop them from ruining me. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. You did more than that. You broke the cycle. After he left, I walked along the shore, the waves cold against my ankles. For the first time, I didn't feel heavy with anger or sadness. Just light. One morning, months later, I received a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, sharp, my mother's. My heart hesitated before I opened it, but I couldn't. Not yet. I traced the seal with my finger. feeling the faint tremble of old wounds reopening. Then I placed it gently inside my grandmother's old jewelry box, beside the locket she'd given me. Not today, I whispered. Some stories don't need to be reopened. Some answers come in the silence we choose. I often imagine my parents sitting in the empty house, surrounded by echoes of their former lives. Maybe they finally understood that love cannot be bought or traded. Maybe they didn't. Either way, the lesson had been written into their losses, and that was enough. One evening, as the sun sank beneath the horizon, I stood on the balcony of my cottage. The sea wind played with my hair, and the air smelled of salt and promise. I thought of my grandmother again, her laugh, her warmth, her words. Never let money own your heart. I smiled softly. I kept that promise, Grandma, I whispered into the wind. Behind me, the house was small but full of life. Laughter from the children I'd helped, the scent of bread baking, the sound of belonging. It was the home I'd always wanted, built not from wealth but from truth. Revenge hadn't been about their downfall. It was about my freedom. My silence had become my justice. My peace, the sweetest retribution of all. As the stars began to appear one by one, I closed my eyes and let the waves carry away what little bitterness remained. They had lost everything they'd stolen, and I had finally found everything they could never buy.